Hello, my name is Aisha. I'm from MYReaders. Today we're going to be speaking to Akmar. She's a reading specialist and a teacher of the deaf. Hi Akmar, thank you for joining us today.
Hi Aisha, thank you for inviting me. All right, so my name is Nurul Akmar Abdul Aziz. I am a teacher of the deaf and also a reading specialist. Before this, I was an English teacher. My undergrad was in TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. And then I taught English for 4 years in Sampurna. Before continuing with my master's in deaf education and also reading specialist. I have always wanted to do deaf education since undergrad. In fact, when I was in New Zealand doing my undergrad, I took a course relating to deafness, like auditing 1 or 2 classes. So I feel like with deaf community, there is a misunderstanding that I feel like with all these abilities, there is a misunderstanding that there is a lack of potential in learning, for example, or lack of potential in contributing to society, for example. And I feel like that is a big misunderstanding. And with the deaf community, with deafness, it is not a cognitive disability. And I feel like at that time, it was just a language barrier. And if we can do something about it, like we can definitely tap into their potential. So that's how I got into deaf education. Reading is essentially decoding a spoken language. So you can't really decode a language that you haven't heard, for example. So that's the challenge with deaf kids. The way I would answer it is deafness is like, hearing loss is like a continuum. And also it depends on whether the child wears hearing aids or cochlear implant, whether they benefit from those hearing aids, whether they receive speech therapy, and whether it works for them, and also what is their mode of communication, because it's different for in all of this continuum. So I would go to the like opposite end. So let's say kids who are signers who don't really benefit from hearing equipment. So meaning to say that they totally rely on visual language. So we can't really use phonics with them because phonics is essentially sound. So they can't really, they have residual hearing, but you know how speech sounds have different frequencies, high and low frequencies. So some of them might have access to only low frequency sounds like the vowel sounds, A, or like B, low frequency sounds, but they might not have access to high speech sounds, high frequency speech sounds like S or Th, right? So these sounds are almost impossible for them to hear and hence to produce. So phonics is not really effective for them. So we would use whole word approach, meaning to say, introducing whole words and say, okay, let's say cat. So C-A-T, label cat, picture cat, or label cat, the real object cat, for example. So of course, this is very challenging because of course, we can memorize, but it is still very limited and it is not economical, especially when we encounter new words. So with kids who learn phonics or who understand the principles of phonics, they might be able to read words that they haven't never heard before. And sometimes even when we give nonsense words, they can decode because they apply the letter sound correspondence principle, but not with deaf kids who are not taught phonics, right? So it is very challenging for them in that sense. That's why reading is a prevalent issue among children with hearing loss. And then let's say if we move further a bit, have some speech and also sometimes sign. The problem is still the same. So they might benefit a little bit from phonics, but still not the whole range of sounds, speech sounds. They would still have issue with reading. So let's say if we were to move to the other continuum, that means kids who only use speech to communicate, who benefit from listening and who is using their hearing equipment like full time, you know, they're like listening and speaking, for example, they would still have issues because listening has to be trained. Listening is not natural. I am currently doing teletherapy. I provide teletherapy to children with hearing loss since last year. In the beginning, I worked together with Hear Me. It is an NGO of a parent advocacy group who have children with hearing loss. So what I do is specifically literacy intervention. So I use MYReaders, especially in introducing initial sounds or beginning sounds, because it is already, uh, they come with like topics already prepared, right? So it is easy for me to just follow along. I introduce letters, sounds, and object related to that sound. And then I will give them a lot of pictures that start with that sound. So we will practice saying the words, we will practice identifying the sound. For example, let's say we're doing s, so we have sandwich. Sometimes the words are long, but I feel like it's okay because it's familiar, like sandwich, strawberry, sandcastle. It's pretty long. Yes, or stove. They have seen stove every day, but they do not know that it is a stove. Yes. So, and after that, I would do other activities like maybe matching sound with objects if we have learned more than one. Sound sort. For example, let's say we have done 3 sounds. For example, so I'm going to like show them one object, maybe ball. Where should I put ball under s, b, or r? Yeah, so I like sorting because it really helps them to categorize the sound. And of course, reading. So I read an article about a reading intervention that uses the P plus R method, phonology or phonics plus reading. So this is applicable to everyone. When we teach reading, when we teach sounds or phonics, we must incorporate reading real words as well, real sentences as well, not just sound, words, and then stop. This is important because reading essentially involves like, you know, sentences, paragraphs, not just one word reading, right? So that's how I do it. After we work on the sounds, I'm going to read the child a book. So it's a bit tricky, of course. Let's say if I were doing this sound, I wouldn't be able to find a whole book that only talk about objects that start with s, but it's fine. As long as there are like maybe 2 or 3 words that I can highlight, it's enough. I think now that I have learned about, you know, deaf education, about reading specialists, I think I want parents to understand that children, more often than not, they try really hard to please us. Because I've seen many kids when they work with us, um, when they know that we get frustrated sometimes, right? Because to us this is so easy. I'm just teaching you one sound and it seems like you're not getting it. You know, sometimes we, even when we didn't mean to, it manifests in our facial expression or maybe in desperation in our voice. But most of the time children really do not want to disappoint us. So I feel like even though it can be hard at times, try to be encouraging as possible because they do try very hard. So please be more understanding, please be more encouraging, and do not feel the need to correct your child all the time. This is another thing because of course correction is important, but make it focused. For example, when I'm reading this book today, I am only going to correct one thing. Even though the child might be making 5 mistakes, focus on only one thing, because if we were to correct the mistakes all the time, to them there's nothing that they can do good, so why bother trying? So we do not want them to feel like that. We want to give them a sense of achievement, right? So no matter how small the achievement is, acknowledge it, But with that said, acknowledgement is supposed to be tied to a tangible or a concrete behavior. So for example, again, this is what I learned as an educator. Rather than say you are smart, say, I really like the way you think about the answer. I really like the way you tried many times to get it right. I like the way that even though it is hard, you keep trying. So acknowledge that specific behavior. So yeah, I think those are my suggestions, I would say, especially with kids with special needs. I have recently started live videos on FB. So please follow my Facebook, my full name, Nurul Akmar Abdul Aziz, and I have also uploaded these videos on my YouTube channel. Again, please subscribe, Nurul Akmar Abdul Aziz. So I talk about reading, being a reading specialist, some reading principles, and books that we can use to teach reading to children.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.